When it comes to RPGs, there is a plethora to choose from. The Nintendo Switch is currently jam-packed with games, but navigating through the sea of titles can be a challenge in itself. But at the same time, it's fun because you can discover unexpected and well-made gems. In this video, I highlight 15 RPGs that are all available for the handheld console. Feel free to support my channel by subscribing. I post new Switch-related videos every week. First, we have Octopath Traveler. This is not just a graphical work of art, it's also one of the most unique JRPGs released in modern times. Even though the game is 5 years old, its solid design shows how timeless an adventure game can be. The possibility to choose between 8 different characters means that you can find your own favorite, regardless of whether you want to play a dancer, mage or thief. All heroes have their unique characteristics that make the game a varied experience, but the game's narrative has a different structure that may not suit everyone. It's different, but at the same time dramatic and engaging. Next up is Xenoblade Chronicles 2. When it comes to size, this is the game that comes to mind. It's massive. Open world games are sometimes characterized by running around a land with limited areas, but this game goes in a different direction. We are talking about continents. The developer Monolith Soft has spared no expense when it comes to exploration. There is so much to see and explore that you will likely need days to discover it all. However, what can be perceived as annoying is the number of tutorials. You are often interrupted for something new to be introduced, but it also shows how extensive this game is. There is so much to learn. Then we have Crystar. This is an action role-playing game with a narrative that is of the more complex kind. Despite the fact that the story can sometimes be perceived as convoluted, it becomes clear what this game is trying to tell. It's a dramatic story about mental illness and losing people you love, but the game also contains action-filled moments that are much easier to understand. The battles are fast-paced and can sometimes require some button mashing, but it's the difference between a comprehensive narrative and fast-paced fights that creates a dynamic whole. An additional dimension that adds color to the game is that you can feed your dog and check out your collectibles. Crystar is a game that may require some patience, but there's also entertainment value in taking part in the gripping story. Then we have Persona 5 Royal. This is an RPG that has won several awards, and no wonder. It's considered by many to be one of the best RPGs of all time, but those who own a Nintendo Switch have had to wait a long time. The game was released in 2016 for the PlayStation, and another 6 years passed before it appeared on the handheld console. But the wait has not been in vain. With a deep story and gameplay based on the player's decisions, an adventure is created that can appeal to most people. This is a lovely game that works just as well docked as it does handheld. Today there are tons of Persona games on the market, and it can be difficult to navigate the jungle of titles, but Persona 5 Royal is definitely a game that stands out. This is a must-have for any fan of the series. Next up is Final Fantasy VII. This is a classic RPG that was ported to the Nintendo Switch in 2019. Despite the fact that most fans will recognize the original game, this version contains some new things. You can change the speed up to 3 times. In addition, there is the option to turn off battle encounters. Final Fantasy is a game series that is well represented on the Nintendo Switch, and this game is definitely worth checking out. There's a reason why it's one of the most popular games in the franchise. With an engaging story, smooth combat system and spectacular boss battles, this is a game that many people can enjoy. The next game is Legend of Heroes Trails from Zero. This game was received with open arms when it was released in 2010. Unfortunately, it only came out in Japan, so fans living in the West had to wait patiently for a new release. And 2022 was the year it was finally ported to the Nintendo Switch. Despite the fact that the game can be considered to have repetitive side quests, there is actually a well-crafted main story and a cast of characters that both add value and have depth. This is a remaster done right and can occupy a fan of Japanese JRPGs for hours. However, I recommend playing through previous games in the series, because there are plot threads that connect to different games. Next up is Bravely Default 2. Despite its name, it's the third game in the series and is also considered a worthy sequel to previous titles. But this time the game takes a new direction, with an all-new cast of characters combined with jaw-dropping visuals. This is a modern game that's right on the cutting edge, regardless of whether you are in the upper world or down in a cave. This is an appealing experience, but sometimes you play low-performance games for Nintendo Switch. But Bravely Default 2 shows the opposite. This is a game that fits very well both in docked mode and handheld. Bravely Default 2 has shown how well a game can perform on a console with technical limitations. I recommend this one. Next up is Triangle Strategy. Square Enix has indeed found a winning concept. The similarities to Octopath Traveler are striking, but Triangle Strategy tells something different. This game has a complex narrative where our choices play a decisive role in possible outcomes. Text-heavy games may not be for everyone, but at the same time, the developer has managed to create an adventure that offers lots of drama and unpredictable events. Fans of Final Fantasy Tactics and Tactics Ogre will probably recognize the gameplay, but this is still a modern adventure that further develops the genre in a stylish way. It is turn-based combat at its best. Next up is Tactics Ogre Reborn. Tactics Ogre is not only a classical JRPG, it was also a genre-defining game that was praised for the implementation of a narrative into the gameplay, but this was a long time ago. A revised version was released for the Nintendo Switch in 2022, and for those who love turn-based battles in a modernized version, you should check this out. But despite everything new, the graphics can still be perceived as dated. However, you can expect an engaging story, a comprehensive campaign, and a combat system that most people can enjoy. Next up is Dragon Quest XI. Square Enix truly sets the bar high when it comes to producing state-of-the-art RPGs. Dragon Quest XI is not only a worthy part of a larger series, it's also an excellent game for old and potential new players, much because of a different visual experience. The game can be seen from both a two-dimensional and three-dimensional perspective, something that is rarely seen these days. Seeing the game from a two-dimensional perspective may not appeal to everyone, but the ability to see everything from a modern perspective makes up for it. Dragon Quest XI naturally has a place in any JRPG collection and is a must-have for fans of turn-based RPGs. Next up is Live Alive. This game is truly a trip down memory lane and attracted a lot of attention when it was released for the Super Famicom in 1994. Of course, it didn't sell as well as established titles like Final Fantasy, but it was received with mostly positive reviews. But even though the game is almost 30 years old, this remake is a demonstration of how to modernize. With updated graphics and redesigned sound, this is a game that works well both docked and handheld. The game is different in that it consists of 7 chapters linked to different eras. You can play as a caveman, but also experience a world with future robots. In other words, the span of time is significant in this game. Although Live Alive may have aged with dignity, this remake is well worth checking out. Then we have NieR Automata, the end of the YoRHa edition. This game was highly praised when it first arrived on the Nintendo Switch, but there were question marks around a performance-demanding game like this. In retrospect, I think a lot of people were surprised when they saw how well NieR Automata ran on the Switch. The frame rate was set to 30 FPS, and this was done to create a steady port. Unlike the original that was released on PlayStation 4, the Switch version contains some new things to play with, including new items and costumes. This game can be considered a modern classic and should be in every Nintendo Switch collection. Next up is Harvestella. Despite the fact that there are similarities with Final Fantasy and Rune Factory, Harvestella is an enjoyable role-playing game with its own style. It's a unique take on the farming genre, as it's not just about taking care of your everyday chores. You can also take part in plenty of action by choosing one of the game's 12 classes. We're not necessarily talking about playing as a farmer, rather it's about being a fighter, mage or a shadow walker. Varied gameplay can be a successful concept if done right, and Harvestella is a good example where different styles have been successfully combined. Next up is Sakuna of Horizon Ruin. Few games have such a unique concept as Sakuna of Horizon Ruin. It blends a beautiful art style with an elegant design without compromising on quality. It's possible to experience the game from both a 2D and 3D perspective, where the main aspects are well composed. But what makes this a different experience is that you partially sow and harvest crops. More precisely, rice is an important resource in the game. On the other hand, this is also an adventure game that most closely resembles the hack and slash genre. Sometimes games may contain elements that do not deliver, but Sakuna is surprisingly solid and can be considered a hidden gem. It's a must-buy for anyone who appreciates a distinctive RPG game with plenty of variety. Next up is MONARK. This is a turn-based RPG that takes place in a university setting, but don't expect high-achieving students who prioritize their studies. Instead, we get to experience a horrifying story of mysterious murders and a thick, creepy fog that surrounds the academy. MONARK is a story-driven game that may suit those with a penchant for the occult and mysterious. But the game also contains lots of turn-based battles where you, together with your colleagues, have to defeat the forces of darkness. However, the fights can drag on considerably as they can last for over an hour, but it also gives one the opportunity to learn the best strategies to defeat the opponents. It can test your patience, but be rewarding at the same time. It's also a game that has an exploratory aspect. Even though you are mostly in the school environment, there are many rooms to explore and some puzzles to solve. So, these are 15 RPGs that could all be worth keeping an eye on. Of course, there are many more that I will cover in future videos. Let me know which game is your favorite by leaving a comment below. With that said, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I review new games every week and do other Switch related stuff. Have a great day, see ya!